Hello there everyone, welcome back to the channel, beautiful. How are you doing today? My name is Joesephyr, and in today's Dissidia Opera Omnia video, we're going to be talking about Krile's intersecting wills and her brand new FR and rework, as well as a comeback king in Auron who gets a heck of a glow up from his LD only rework, and it's a lot. So if you'd like to learn more about Krile, Auron and the event that comes with them, then stay tuned and keep on watching. You guys all know the drill by now. Do check all the description box below for all of my social media links, including Twitch, where you can find me streaming pretty much all the time these days, whether it be Dissidia Final Fantasy, Opera Omnia, or Final Fantasy 8, Final Fantasy 5, Final Fantasy 14, Monster Hunter, Smash Bros, all sorts of various different things if you want to come along and find me on there. Over on Patreon, I do shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video, and I also have every one of my patrons shout out at the end of all of my videos. And today that person is going to be Dynamiso, who is brand new to my Patreon. A massive thank you goes out to you, especially as we're approaching the 150 mark for Patreon. It's wonderful to have your support, and everybody else as well. And you have Beatrix on your title card, like, I can't even. Thank you ever so much for that, and a massive thank you to all of my patrons. If you'd like more information, definitely click on that link in the description box below. And of course, don't forget to check out all of the other content creators and resources out there for Dissidia Opera Omnia, as well as myself. Okay, so let's get started looking at this banner. So the banner that we're going to be looking at today is Krile's banner, as you can see here, which is going to contain all of her gear, including her brand new FR weapon, her LD returns and everything. And we're also going to get returning LD kits for Strago and Auron, and then Kane is also going to have his BT on this banner if you want another opportunity to get that. I would like another opportunity to get Kane BT. I'm hoping to get it on this banner. So, taking a look at what's available on here, first things first, I'm not going to forget again about talking about force enhancements, because they're actually very important, particularly for characters that charge the FR gauge quickly, so characters that do attacks that don't deal damage, Krile being a pretty decent example of it. Strago gets his force enhancements here, and they're nice. The thing with force enhancement points is, and the reason that I probably forgot to talk about them before, is you're going to use them on characters that you're likely to use a lot. It's one of those kinds of situations. Strago, yeah, he benefits from them, but not any more than any other character does, really. So him being a damage dealer as well means that it's quite interchangeable with a lot of characters. He's still a good damage dealer, but he does still suffer from being an LD only damage dealer that needs to be supplemented with other supports, perhaps BT effects from support characters. So if you've got your Warrior of Light or something like that ready to go, perhaps you'll consider using Strago again. But moving on to characters that get other more significant benefits here, Auron gets a rework here, and much like Galuf before him, Auron's buffs as an evade and counterattack are pretty spectacular. So his basic rework just adds some HP dumps across his kit to Banishing Blade and Purgatory, as well as Dragon Fang as well. It doesn't really add much else other than that, but this is all good because it keeps him up to date, and you still get your melee resist down, which is something that's significant for him. But we all know that the real meat of Auron's kit is in his LD. So when he got his LD, he transformed from a pretty mediocre damage dealer into a pretty fantastic evade and counter tank. Now, the difference between him and Galuf actually can do slightly more HP dumps on countering, as long as he's getting his extra counter in on single targets, and relies more on brave gains and has slightly more healing properties, whereas Auron has debuffing properties and churns out a lot more damage, especially considering that his counters have AoE HP damage on them, and he's putting HP damage resist down on the enemies, meaning they're going to take a decent chunk of damage every time they try and hit him. So Tornado gives you get extra uses of it. You start with one of the buffs that you get from it, but not the other ones. You start with the buff that augments his offensive capabilities and gives him Last Stand and things like that, but Sentinel is the one that you actually need in order for him to start covering the other characters. So you are still going to need to use the LD pretty early. And you get extra HP damage and brave damage added to the full break debuff, which he inflicts with the LD itself and every counter that he does. And then counter becomes a 3 HP dumping defense ignoring attack. So, like I said, Galuf likes brave gains, Auron likes dealing brave damage. So if you're wanting a character that does everything, then you might want to pick up both of them. And you may have preferences to one or the other. But the fact that Auron can like dish out these really hefty debuffs, and he does some pretty nice generic debuffs on top of this as well, he's very hard to ignore. Combined with the fact that he does get force enhancements, whereas Galoof hasn't had them yet, it's gonna look really good for Auron. Certainly up until we get Gladiolus come back later down the line, and his rework actually manages to outshine both of them in a lot of ways. But you can end up using both of them. Auron is a very good investment. I'm waffling now, but Auron is a very good investment. If you already have his kit, then you're going to be laughing, and this banner has a lot less value for you. But if you don't have Auron, then this banner has a lot more value for you. So now let's move on into Krile, and before I forget as well, a big shout out to Mediu for their translations over on Reddit. So invaluable, thank you ever so much. So she gets a rework here. It only actually adds anything to her thunder attack, and the thing with Krile is that her potencies on her attacks are actually fairly weak until you start adding in Brave Gains and, you know, her ability to increase weakness damage through Ray of Hope, which is honestly the ability that you're kind of using her for. It's fine, it's a triple HP dump now, you get tons of uses of it, and that's pretty much all there is to say about the rework. And her EX gets 5 HP dumps on it, which is nice, but the main thing you got out of this was her Earth Crystal, which was at the end of every turn, whether it be yours or your opponent's, you'd get Brave Gains across the board for those 5 turns, which was really powerful. Nowadays, there are so many characters that have Brave Retain or Brave Gains on party, Brave Gains on HP attack. There's so many ways of gaining bravery. You probably don't need this. It's useful, it's nice, and it plays into her FR very nicely. But once again, the big thing when it comes to Krile is her LD. So her LD is AoE, Thunder, a Brave HP damage, a full HP damage across the board, and her Sympathetic Heart buff is Brave Gains, as well as Thunder Enchant for the party, and she has Thunder Imperil in her kit as well through her LD and her EX. And it also puts a trap on the enemy that, when it triggers, hits the enemy for now 4 HP dumps and then paralyzes that enemy for the following turn. So it's kind of like a delayed paralysis. It can be really useful. But the shining kind of thing with her kit here is she has a brand new FR. So her partner is Realm, and she sort of sketches and she summons Ramuh's Rod, and then Krile does big thunder damage with that. And the force gauge with this is that you do thunder damage or Krile batteries other party members. So when you've maxed out Krile's force enhancements, etc., you'll find you'll get pretty hefty gains by using her Ray of Hope buff while you have off-turn damage going off elsewhere. So say you're using Kane, he's up in the sky throwing spears down, Krile's using Ray of Hope, you're getting a pretty hefty charge out of that, so there's 20%, and then once Kane is throwing his spears down, you get a little bit extra because a party member has dealt thunder damage. Thunder damage is very common across the game, and there's quite a few FRs going forward, like Desh and Reno, which are both, Reno is very popular, Desh not so much. That ask for thunder damage, and that, you know, you've got Garnet, you've got Lightning, you've got so many characters that can deal thunder damage and can enchant the party for thunder, that having something to do with thunder damage can actually be really relevant. Of course, this does mean, however, that in events that lock thunder damage out, Krile is completely useless. There's nothing there for her, and because the thunder damage is quite so popular, maybe you don't need Krile. Like, there's probably leading on the don't need Krile. She's cool, and I would really like her because I'm a massive FF5 fan, but most people probably can live without her, especially if you own Garnet, who, let's face it, at this point in time, is the premier Thunder Enchanter. However, she does have the ability to charge the gauge very quickly and also have an FR at her own disposal. So people have been using Penelo in the last event, whereas if you use Krile, you can use Krile to charge her own gauge up by using Ray of Hope. Just bear in mind that it's probably the ability you're going to be using to charge the force time percentages up as well as charge the gauge. So don't overuse it in either side. So now let's take a look at the event that's coming along with Krile, which is her Intersecting Wills mission. And once again, massive thank you to DissidiaCompendium.com for this information over here. You'll be pleased to know that this Shinryu is significantly easier than the last one. There's no HP poison or any shenanigans like that we need to deal with. Basically, when the gauge increases, you'll find that enemies don't want to take damage from anything other than thunder attacks, and they gain bravery after their turn. So it's bravery gens and deal thunder damage. Though you don't actually have to deal thunder damage. They receive reduced bravery damage from non-thunder attacks, but they don't receive reduced HP damage. So if you're using a Brave Gains based team, you'll probably find you don't even need thunder damage at all. And when they get to 100%, they have a force ability, which is just a AoE Brave HP attack. So as long as you've got some mitigation somewhere down the line, you'll probably find that this is a bit easier for you anyway. Thunder damage is also very easily solved as well. You don't have to pull for Krile for this. Garnet, obviously, will absolutely make mincemeat out of this. Layla will do very well here, because you'll have your mitigation through evasion, as well as having thunder damage. Edge will do very well here. There's lots of bits and pieces that will work in order to just deal with it. In terms of the force time itself, when the force time is up, they can't have their bravery go past 20% max bravery. So if you've seen like Ursula or something like that, it's very similar, just on the enemy side. And past that, you just need to be able to deal a lot of damage in a short space of time. They have slightly less health this time than the last one. They have 50 million instead of 60 million. But characters that you'll commonly see here will be characters Kayn and Krile, obviously. Ramza, Garnet, Edge, Auron. Auron is obviously going to do very well here. It's an event that's built for him, and letting the enemies take a lot of turns is really good. They have a recast attack that can paralyze, so as long as you're bearing that in mind, whether you're dealing a lot of delay early on, they do frame their turns when they get their recast gauge, but if they never get their recast gauge, then you don't have to worry about it. Or you can just mitigate that damage and make sure you're not able to be paralyzed. You can use Lena Call, Warrior of Light can soak stuff like that up. Selfie has debuff, some debuff evasion in there. There's ways around that. And when they get their recast gauge, they also sort of get a red aura, which is what frames their turns, but it also reduces their defenses. So by and large, this event should be a little bit easier for people than the last one. So now it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to let your voice be heard and let everyone know whether you'd pull on a banner and why that may or may not be the case. So, big thank you, of course, to all of my patrons for their votes and their comments. From what I can gather, I'm not the only FF5 fan in my community, and that warms my heart to see, and I'm very, very pleased about that. But let's go into some numbers straight away. Only 13% of people are going to be using gems on this banner, 37% of people are using 100 or more tickets, 30% are using less than 100 tickets, and 20% have said no thank you. I honestly swear down am torn between heavy tickets or gems, because I don't have Kayn. I went tickets with him for his FR and got quite lucky, and I would like the extra shot at his BT. And I love FF5, but I know that in a few weeks' time I'm probably not going to end up using Krile. But I want the costume because it's a freelancer Krile costume and it's adorable and I want it. So I'm kind of torn between the two. But then I never like spending gems, so I'll probably use some tickets first and see how we go, and then I'll probably cave. I know what I'm like. So let's go over into some comments. So Alex says, contrary to what I initially planned, I'm skipping building Krile. I assume she would have been better than Kayn's, which is generally true, but for the units I want to use it turns out I'm actually better off sticking with Kayn's FR for a bit. And that's what I like about the era. Krile is nice, but absolutely unnecessary for me at this stage. The goal is to maximise the damage of the main DPS I choose, and given my playstyle, she's not adding that much to it. I also don't feel like I need a charger right now. Penelo works just fine, and with all the insane tanks we have so far, letting the enemy start the force time is not that scary. Speaking of which, Auron is absolutely insane, I can't wait to bring him onto the field. As I said earlier, this banner has middling value, depending on how much you like FF5 and how much you like Krile. Unless you don't have Auron. If you don't have Auron, this banner has a lot more value for you because he is really good. If you've used Galoof and enjoyed him, you're likely to enjoy Auron just as much, if not more. And I will just say that. Now Thea says tickets for Krile. She's got synergy with Edge and Garnet, which is going to enable her quite well. I've also never been able to use Krile before, so I'll be able to enjoy her as a new unit. I need both their LD and FR weapon, and I'm still after Kayn BT, so I may pivot to gems on this over Braska. Also, did I mention that her new costume is awesome? I will admit, I'm kind of looking at this as well, and seeing the fact that she synergizes with Edge and Garnet, and the costume is a thing as well. And I did go pretty heavily for Edge, and Krile is an enabler for Edge to kind of shine and do his thing alongside a character like Garnet, who has off-turn damage and is also a Thunder Enchanter. So I think that there's a lot of synergy there to play around with Krile if you're looking to go down that road. Just be warned of obviously events in the future that may lock out thunder damage. But then there are other characters that suffer from that too. One of which is Edge, one of which is Garnet, although our Garnet can switch to water. Then you just have to kind of always bear that in mind. But that certainly doesn't mean you can't use Krile for a bunch of other stuff. Finally, Cobalt Zork says, I really like Krile in OO. The every turn party regen off her EX was quirky back in the day and a great enabler for Cloud's BT back in the day. Her FR looks like it will pair really well with the various Thunder enchants we have available. Garnet. Though it looks like you'll need to time her EX and someone else's BT phase to get the biggest bang for your buck. A nice puzzle piece to put together. All of this is secondary though to the fact that if you build Krile, you have an excuse to buy her costume, which is, as I believe the kids put it these days, totes adorbs. Very that. And I did actually fail to mention earlier as well the fact that her EX is a bit lacking in some respects, especially if you're using her alongside Garnet, who just maxes out everyone's bravery gauge anyway. But there are situations where you could go into a BT phase and it's not going to tick down during that BT phase, and you're getting loads of bravery across the board, and maybe you have a selfie friend lined up and Rapture is on the enemy and you get those launches. Cloud is a great character to use alongside Krile for that exact reason. So there are a lot of benefits to Krile, but I do ultimately think that there are going to be much stronger FRs in the future. So unless you really love Krile or FF5 in general, or Thunder damage, and you want to enable those kinds of damages, then that's going to be up to you. So now for the big question of the banner, should you be pulling for it come July 4th? And honestly, I think personally that the value of this banner depends entirely on whether you have Auron or not. If you don't have Auron, this is a great banner for you. It's going to have Krile as a secondary prize, which is bizarre considering that she's a VFR character, but Auron is who you should consider first. His LD extension, his C90 upgrades, the fact that he has force enhancements, he is an absolute beast, and he does heavy counter damage, debuffs. There's a lot that really likes him. It's really important to know how good off-turn damage is during force time, because during enemy turns the force time counter doesn't tick down. So if Auron's dealing 3 HP dumps in off turns while the force gauge is already high, or force time is already at a high percentage, you're gonna get a lot of bang for your buck during that time. Honestly, I don't have a lot of negative things to say about Auron. To be honest, he doesn't cover AoE damage, but a lot of counter tanks don't. Galoof exists, so therefore there's a character that does similar things to him, or can fulfill the same role at least. You may be wanting to wait for Gladiolus, who is also an exceptional tank. Honestly, the tanks are eating good, especially the counter-based ones. So between those three and Warrior Light, you're doing okay for tanks. Krile is a good character. She has glaring weaknesses in her kit, the biggest one being that she doesn't have HP healing in her kit, and she's a support character that doesn't do a huge amount of damage. Like, the LD debuff is really nice. Like, if you pair that with another character with control-based effects, it allows you to stack paralysis for multiple turns, and that can be really powerful in the right hands and if it's set up correctly. And the fact that she's thunder-based means that you get an early jump on some of these thunder-based FRs, and thunder-based damage is not hard to build around. Garnet uses it, Edge uses it, there's loads of characters that Reno uses it, and his FR will be really good. So this is a great stopgap if you're looking to go down that road until Reno comes out. And I'd say that Krile does it better than Desh does, because she at least charges the gauge very quickly through her Ray of Hope ability, and she can like push the force time bonuses up quite quickly through that same ability. So if you're wanting to play around with that, then go ahead. However, just be warned that she does have some big weaknesses in her kit, so I'm probably going to be pulling on here. I'm not necessarily saying that everyone should, unless you don't have Auron. So that's going to be all for today's video. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. I've also released a new beginner's guide to DFFOO for anyone who wants to look at that, or perhaps wants to introduce their friends to this game, whether they come from Final Fantasy Record Keeper, or they've just never played a gacha game before. I will leave a link to that in the description box below for those of you who want to see that. Let me know in the comments below whether you're pulling for Krile, or if you don't have Auron and you're pulling for him. Definitely recommend Auron. I've said that before, I shall say it again. Very good character. But let me know in the comments below what you guys think. And then that's going to be it from me. So the next event that we're going to be looking at is going to be the next story chapter with Braska and the Braska's final Aeon fight. So that should be fun. Thank you ever so much once again, and I'll see you next time. Have a lovely day, beautiful. Take care.